So what I'm going to be doing on this is neither an ODU slide, it's actually a Virginia Tech slide, but I think it might be useful for the audience in this to see how university research and university initiatives can actually create what Lloyd will so clearly describe as now an industry-led initiative. But the move for offshore wind is just captured in this title slide. It goes back over 15 years now. In September of 2005, it originated with Maritime Division of SAIC, a fellow by the name of Neil Rondorf, and he came up to the Virginia Tech Advanced Research Institute in Northern Virginia, and after a series of presentations, actually ended up getting the General Assembly interested enough to fund the first offshore wind feasibility study for the Commonwealth. And so I will just go through this really briefly, and the PDF will be available and Dan can circulate it to everyone. But basically, we ended up with a consortium and we did a feasibility study report. We also were the technical lead for the Commonwealth to help identify leases, both commercial and research leases. And then we ended up sort of transitioning to industry following the applied research roadmap that we had in the offshore wind final report, which was actually produced in 2010. And so, and then Dominion stepped in, and Lloyd will give you an update, but it started out with this a cost reduction study that Dominion led, and then Dominion moved on and was successful in a nationwide competition for an advanced technology demonstration project. And so these are just some of the key events that, a small amount of funding from the Commonwealth General Fund in the 2006-2007 timeframe actually led to attracting, millions to tens of millions of dollars to the Commonwealth in federal funding. So this is again, this link is here. You can get the final report, our feasibility study, which is really now more of historical interest than anything else. But this just shows the various universities that were involved in that study, and we looked at we did a hypothetical design and cost estimate. There was mapping of the offshore wind energy areas. James Madison and VIMS did a lot of that work, GIS work. And then a lot of us combined to look at the economic development potential. And then ODU also had an algae to biodiesel project, which I won't go any farther with here, but that was the VCIRC funding. And it was about $500,000 over 2 years. And then this was the first briefing we had to Dominion back in 2009. And so again, this is where we were trying to advise the state's incumbent regulated utility for the eastern part of the state of this tremendous resource that was off the Virginia coastline. And this is only one slide from that presentation, but it said, we had a really rough estimate. These were turbines that were existing then, which were much smaller than they are now. But we said, maybe up to 4.5 gigawatts. And indeed, we weren't too far off because there is now a 5.2 gigawatt target for offshore wind by 2035 in the Commonwealth. So I just thought that was interesting to compare what we thought about in 2009 versus where we are now, and Lloyd will elaborate on the Dominion's commercial offshore wind development potential. This is the kind of thing that university researchers do. So we took 2 fleets of turbines, the Intercon, which these were land-based, a direct drive turbine, which is the Diamonds. And then Vestas has a whole series, or now they're Vestas MHI, which stands for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. But Vestas had a gearbox turbine, and you can clearly see where there's an efficiency loss in the gear turbine for a given rotor swept area. So, for example, if you want to get 50% capacity factor, so you have a 6 megawatt turbine and you want it to produce an average of 3 megawatts in Virginia's offshore wind climate, you would have to have 16% more rotor swept area. So it really is an advantage to have direct drive, and we can see the Siemens Gamesa direct drive platforms as the turbines have grown and gone up the scale. And you can sort of see how the latest, well, the ones that are at CVOW now, the pilot project, which is at the very top of the upper right graph, you know, we projected would have more than a 50% capacity factor, and it's clearly a really good performer. And this, you know, is a factor, I believe, in this direct drive platform in how Dominion has selected Siemens Gamesa as their preferred turbine supplier. But again, we did this back in the 2007, 2008, 2009 timeframe. We also helped with site selection. You can see where the details of that are. But this just shows how we've deconflicted. We helped by doing a lot of stakeholder outreach. Virginia Tech's Advanced Research Institute, we were in Hampton Roads, and we helped navigate, no pun intended, help navigate the various issues that not only the ports of Baltimore and the Port of Virginia had, but also the longshore transport with the longshore barge traffic. And that at one point they were actually going to split the commercial lease in two, until we met with the port captains, and the Virginia Maritime Association facilitated all that. So again, academics are more than about just publishing papers for journals. We really do try to get involved and engaged with industry. Here are the final selection of the research leases. And again, the CVOW turbines are in this research lease 2, and Lloyd will talk more about that. But you can see that we found this place in a very busy waterway off our and very active military and also space flight operations. We found this area with no conflict, and it's where the nation's largest announced commercial offshore wind project will be built. And we also have the only really right now record of wind and wave measurements that's publicly available. And I can certainly answer questions about that, but we have rigorously analyzed the LiDAR data and sent that on to Dominion. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, George. All right. I am pleased to introduce Lloyd Ely. He is the Site Construction Offshore Winds Program Manager with Dominion Energy. He is responsible for the design, development, and construction of the coastal Virginia offshore wind projects known as CVOW. Lloyd has 7 years of utility experience and over 10 years engineering experience. He began his career at Huntington Ingalls Industries as an electrical engineer for nuclear-powered cruise missile fast attack submarines. During his career, Lloyd has held positions in engineering, research and development, project management, and renewable asset management. Lloyd is certified project management professional and most recently served as the vice programs of the Virginia chapter of the American Association of Blacks in Energy. Thank you so much for being here, Lloyd.
All right, thanks, Rima. I'm going to share my screen and turn off my camera for the presentation. So just give me 1 second. All right, and it should be displayed. I guess, Rima, can you just confirm that you can see the screen?
I did a moment ago and then it went away.
Okay. It should be back on now.
I've got an arrow.
Okay, let me try sharing again.
All right, you're up.
Awesome. Okay. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. So my name is Lloyd Ely. As Rima mentioned, I am the manager of project construction for Dominion Energy. And so today I'll be talking through our coastal Virginia offshore wind projects and providing an overview of both the pilot project as well as the commercial project and their current status. So before we walk through the offshore wind projects, one of the first things that I wanted to cover was an overview of how does an offshore wind facility work. So this diagram walks through the generation cycle for a typical.
Dominion has a very large fleet of solar electric, and so solar is a seasonal complement to offshore wind. So offshore winds are big in the winter, and solar is big in the summer. And then the valleys between on the shoulder seasons can be filled by some kind of a hydrogen or a hydrogen carrier. And so I'll turn it over to Lloyd if he wants to sort of talk about what Dominion's doing in that area.
Yeah, so thanks, George. So yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head. So one of the things that we're doing is we're looking at making sure that we have a diverse fuel mix within the company. So as you mentioned, solar and offshore wind do complement each other just because they do generate at different times. But we also look at other generation fuel sources that are located within our fleet, whether it's natural gas, whether it's nuclear. And so one of the things in order to achieve our net zero, carbon-free net zero goal for both the Commonwealth as well as for Dominion, it's important that we have a diverse fuel mix in order to do that, because they do operate at different points and are necessary in order to complement each other in order to continue to meet the load demand. So this is something that, I guess, to answer your question about who is planning and identifying and locating that is something that Dominion is always looking at. And as we do our planning for future generation mixes, we always take that into consideration.
And Dominion also operates, I think, one of the largest pumped hydro storage in the nation. I think you've got a 1 or 2 gigawatt facility in the western part of the state.
In Bath County.
Yeah.
Very good. We have another question. I'll read the question. I don't know who it's best intended for, so I'll let George and Lloyd figure that out. But here's the question. Are there any opportunities for the application of artificial intelligence, machine learning, or whatever term you might, hold on, the text just shifted, might want to use for current analytical techniques to this project?
So Lloyd, again, if you don't mind, I'll sort of say where the R&D is at the national lab and university level, and then you can chime in as to where Dominion might be applying some of this. So one of the things that is probably the most immediately applicable and happening now, we have a proposal under review and another one under development, where machine learning from net ocean data, that's meteorological and oceanographic data. There are a lot of forecast models out there, but forecast is just a computer program based on a lot of parameterizations of ocean and atmospheric physics. And there are now both wave and wind forecasting models that are just on the edge of being transitioned to operation or commercial deployment that are actually assimilating data and going back and training the forecast with the data. In fact, there was a discussion yesterday with the Virginia Pilot Association. They're very concerned about just water levels for crane clearage when they're offloading these big, large Panamax, post-Panamax container ships. And they're very interested in when water levels deviate from the prediction, they want to make sure that they don't schedule a ship visit to the port when the cranes can't actually clear the containers because of high tide being higher than normal due to wind forcing or something else. So this is the area right now that I'm aware of where artificial intelligence and machine learning are being applied to improving the ability to forecast oceanographic and meteorological conditions. And certainly for offshore wind, site access for both construction and for operations depends heavily on the sea state and on the wind speed. And so that's kind of where from my corner of the universe. Over to you, Lloyd.
Yeah, so that's kind of in line with my thinking as well, George, is that we do see artificial intelligence in being used in offshore wind, in the offshore wind industry. More specifically, a lot of times you'll see it being used for forecasting for offshore wind at the site. So as George mentioned, there are floating LiDARs that'll be deployed within the CVOW commercial lease area. And that information will be collected to analyze the wind speeds at hub height within the CVOW commercial area. Another thing is with the CVOW pilot project, it is considered a demonstration project. So we are always looking at different technologies that may be able to be implemented at that site to test before it's rolled out on a larger commercial scale level as well at the CVOW commercial project site.
Thanks, Lloyd. Dan again. I've got a thought about your presentation. I think Reem indicated it's still downloading. If that's PowerPoint, it may be a very big file. Can you save it as a PDF and then try off that?
Yeah, I can definitely do that.
While you're doing that, George and Lloyd, Matt Sharp did thank you for your very good answer, especially the hydrogen part.
Hey, Dan, I have just downloaded Lloyd's presentation. Rima forwarded it to me, and I'm hoping, oops, where's my screen share? I got to screen share first. I am definitely able to, I just got to share my screen, my right monitor like I did last time, and we may be in luck.
Very good.
And then Lloyd, you just tell me.
Hey there, so it finally downloaded, but it looks like your internet may be a little bit faster than mine if it's up and going. Wonderful.
So you should now see the title slide.
Yes,
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'm all set, Lloyd. You just tell me, you drive, baby.
All right.
You tell me where to drive and I'll drive.
Okay. All right, you can go to the next slide. Okay, perfect. So this was the slide I was mentioning earlier, just covering how does an offshore wind facility work. I won't stay too long on this, just so that we can cover the other topics. So starting from the left, you see the offshore wind turbine facilities. Those two turbines will spin as when the wind actually touches the blades, which then causes them to generate electricity. And then you have what's called an inter-array cable, which connects the two turbines to the offshore substation, which would be located offshore within the lease area. That offshore substation collect the electricity that's generated from the various offshore wind turbines, and then transport that power to shore through what's called an export cable. Once that power is at the shoreline, it enters into a collector station where it's then tied directly into the grid. And from there, it goes onto an onshore substation, which functions as the point of interconnect where the power is then sent into homes. George, next slide. So this slide talks a little bit about the benefits of CVOW. A couple of them you'll see are repeats that we actually hit when talking about the questions, one being the clean energy diversity. Offshore wind is definitely a complementary resource with solar since they both generate energy at different times. You also have offshore wind being the foundation that can develop into a Virginia supply chain hub to stimulate economic growth and drive down the cost of offshore wind, especially with the CVOW project. Also, the CVOW commercial project, once fully operational, will generate enough energy to power up to 660,000 homes with zero emissions and fuel costs. And as I mentioned earlier about the clean energy research, with the CVOW pilot project, we're continuing to support the advancement of offshore wind technology and environmental sustainability for marine, avian, terrestrial habitats. There's a lot of ongoing research activity that's taken place at the two turbine demonstration project. Next slide, George. So a little bit about the Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind Pilot Project, which you'll see here referred as Phase 1. The CVOW Pilot Project consists of two 6-megawatt turbines. Those are Siemens Gamesa turbines for a total of 12 megawatts. They're located 27 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach and have the capability of powering up to 3,000 homes. They're also the first offshore wind turbines to be installed in federal waters and the only ones that are owned by an electric utility. And one of the questions that a lot of people may ask is, why did Dominion decide to move forward with the pilot project versus jumping straight into a larger offshore wind development, as many of the earlier developers did? And the answer to that question is the company felt that it was most prudent course of action for us to explore offshore wind where there were unclear and untested regulatory approval processes at the state and federal levels, with a generation technology that was evolving at a rapid pace, to do it at a smaller scale on a demonstration level that would allow us to test the regulatory process and also test the market in a fashion that would mitigate the risk for all stakeholders, and also that is directly applicable to the CVOW commercial project. So a lot of those lessons learned from the permitting, construction, and procurement phase we're actually using and leveraging for the development of the larger project, which is the commercial project. Looking at the pictures that are shown here, these are actual pictures from the construction of the CVOW pilot project. The top left picture shows the Volavant, which is the jackup vessel installing the offshore wind facility during construction over the summer. The picture in the bottom left-hand corner shows that same vessel installing the foundation. And this was a picture of the first foundation being installed in federal waters. So that's a really nice picture there. And then the picture on the right shows the blades being installed on the turbine, which is a very detail-oriented process. And we have another picture that will show kind of the amount of engineering that goes into that process. George, next slide. So just walking through the timeline for the CVOW pilot project, the first steel was in the water in May 21st, 2020. So that's when the first foundation was installed, as you saw in the earlier picture. The first turbine was mechanically complete in on June 20th of 2020. And then the second wind turbine was mechanically completed on June 26th of 2020. After that, we went into a commissioning and testing phase, followed by provisional acceptance being achieved on October 14th, 2020. And then the turbines went into commercial operations on January 11th, 2021. The picture to the top shows a vessel that was used to actually install the export cable. This is a picture of the vessel at what's called the HDD punch-out location, which is your horizontal directional drill location, which is about 2 miles off the coast. That vessel then pulls the cable from that HDD punch-out location to the actual CVOW pilot site, which is located 27 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach. In the picture on the right, you see the tower being installed on top of the transition piece, just referencing the first picture from the first slide that we covered. You see the number of bolts that have to all be aligned when installing that tower on the transition piece. So it's a very heavy engineering scope of work during this phase of the project to ensure that the bolts are properly aligned and that the facility can be installed safely. Next slide. So this slide talks about the CVOW commercial project. As I mentioned earlier, the CVOW commercial project is located directly adjacent to the CVOW pilot project. It consists of approximately 112,800 acres, and will, when fully developed, will provide 2,640 megawatts of offshore wind power, which is enough to power up to 660,000 homes. This is located 27 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach. And just a few updates about the CVOW commercial project. We recently selected Siemens Gamesa as our preferred turbine supplier for the project. So they'll be providing their latest direct drive turbine for the commercial project. And we also selected Ramball as the owner's engineer for the project. So they'll be providing engineering services as we design and develop the facility. And one of the things about Randball is they have years and years of experience designing and developing and engineering offshore wind facilities similar to the one that we're building in Virginia and other markets, including Europe. So walking through the timeline, Dominion secured the lease through a competitive process with BOEM in 2013. We then submitted what's called a site assessment plan in 2016, which walks through how we're planning to study the offshore wind area and also learn more about the wind and wave conditions that we can expect at the site. That was submitted and approved in 2016. Then in 2019, in September 2019, the governor issued Executive Order 43 supporting the development of offshore wind in Virginia. And then Dominion also announced that we were committed to building out the entire project when initially it was looked at as 3 different phases of 880 megawatts each. We decided to develop the project as a whole, developing the full 2,640 megawatts for an $8 billion project. And then in 2020, you had the Virginia Clean Economy Act passed, which supported up to 5.2 gigawatts of offshore wind power in the Commonwealth. In December of 2020, we submitted what's called our Construction and Operations Plan to the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. That's the main permit for the project itself. Once we submitted the COP, once that COP is defined as sufficient and complete, it'll go through about a 9-quarter review and approval process by BOEM. And during that time, BOEM will work with other agencies to approve the application. So with that being the case, we would expect the construction and operations plan to be approved in the 2023 timeframe. So as the permit is going through that review and approval process, we'll also be securing other permits to support the project, as well as planning to file with the State Corporation Commission for approval of the project, with that review expected in 2022. And then coming off of that State Corporation Commission, we're expecting the BOEM approval process for the construction operations plan to be complete in 2023. Which would then allow us to begin major manufacturing of offshore components in that same time frame, with construction slated to start in 2024 and being fully complete and commissioned in 2026. So a little bit about the ongoing activities at the CVOW commercial site. In April 2020, we had various vessels begin performing geophysical and geotechnical studies within the commercial lease area, as well as along the export cable route. Those studies will continue into 2021 just due to the sheer size of the commercial lease area, with it being 112,000 acres. And those studies will provide us with the geological and biological and oceanographic data that we'll need to support planning for both construction activity as well as the engineering design of the facilities to demonstrate how the offshore wind facility can coexist with the natural marine ecosystem that exists off the coast of Virginia Beach. Some more highlights about the CVOW commercial project. It consists of 188 turbines, so we'll be scaling up quite a bit from the 2 that are currently installed. And they'll also be much larger than the current turbines that are off the coast. Right now, the CVOW pilot turbines are about 600 feet tall. For the CVOW commercial project, just due to technology advancement, those turbines we expect will be about 800 feet tall, which is equivalent to the height of an 89-story building. As I mentioned earlier, the total capacity for the CVOW commercial site is 2,640 megawatts. And of course, this area is located directly adjacent to the pilot project. Next slide, George. So a little bit about the Virginia-based operations and installation vessels and what you can expect. The first picture that you see here, which is the Endeavor, is the crew transfer vessel that Dominion Energy recently purchased. This vessel is being used to transport crew members back and forth to the CVOW pilot site. So this is based currently in Virginia Beach. We also have a recent consortium that was announced by Dominion Energy that we had formed to build the first Jones Act compliant wind turbine installation vessel. Keppel is leading the way on this actual construction activity. And once this vessel is built, it will be one of the largest wind turbine installation vessels and capable of supporting installing the latest direct drive turbines that are available on the market. And next slide. So that's all I have as far as the update on the CVOW pilot and commercial project. I wanted to take the remaining time to really just go through questions about both of the projects in general or about Dominion's offshore wind plans. And I see we have a limited amount of time. So Dan, I'll hand it back over to you if you want to run through those.
Well, thank you, Lloyd. I think we only have one question from my buddy Rick Sebringhouse. And let me scan up. Bear with me for a second. A lot of comments about Matt Sharp made a comment, so many bolts. That's nuts. I thought that was very funny and true. Now, here it is from Rick. How much will higher and lower bounds of wind speed affect power production? And I'll direct that to either of you two gentlemen.
Turbines, all wind turbines, offshore or land-based, they have what's called a cut-in wind speed and a cut-out wind and a rated wind speed. And Lloyd can talk to the commercial project, but typically the cut-in wind speed for these turbines is around 4 meters a second. That's maybe 8 knots, something like that. 7 to 8 knots, and that's at hub height. So that's got to be, so the wind lower that we'd be familiar with as recreational boaters would actually be even lower than that. So the turbine just can't turn over. That's the cut-in speed, and then the rated speed is what the turbine, when the turbine is actually spinning at the generator's rated capacity. So in the case of the pilot turbines, that would be 6 megawatts. And that typically happens in the 12 to 13 to 14 meters per second. I don't know exactly what that is for the Siemens Gamesa turbines, and Lloyd maybe can speak to that if he knows or is able to disclose it. But at that point, the blades are fully presented to the wind, and above the rated speed, the blades start to feather, to shed power. Otherwise, they would overheat, overwork the generator. And so the blades are continually feathered. So the greatest turbine overturning moment actually occurs at the rated operating condition. And beyond that, the blades are feathered until you get the cutout speed, which is typically 25 meters a second, which is a high-end tropical storm when the generator would be turned off to avoid damage.
Yes, that's correct, George. So for the CVOW pilot project, for an example, the cut-in speed, which is when the turbines begin to produce electricity when spinning, is about 7 miles per hour, which kind of aligns with the figure that you gave, George. And of course, similar, they have a cutout speed, and at that cutout speed, the turbines will then start to feather the blades in order to reduce the amount of usage on the blades in order to protect themselves. So no, that my answer pretty much aligns with yours on that one.
Great, Rima. Do we have some more questions out there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can see them on my chat, Dan. Would you want me to just go through them until we run out of time?
If you are comfortable with that, George. Absolutely.
Sure. So what are considered reasonable costs? I think I'm gonna punt on that one and turn that over to Lloyd. But I mean, Dominion has to file these filings with the SEC. So Lloyd, do you want to talk a little bit about what your sort of target cost of energy range or what the reasonable costs are that as far as you can disclose those?
Yeah, sure. Similar to other Dominion generation projects, this project will go through a competitive bid process. So one of the topics that you heard me mention was the Virginia Clean Economy Act. And so as part of that, there are several different criteria that is required as part of that legislation. One being that the CVOW project is subject to a competitive procurement and solicitation process for all of the services and equipment. And also that consideration to economic benefits in Virginia are also included as part of the investment and job creation. And that priority hiring is given to vets and also to workers that are local and in historical economic disadvantagement communities. So with all of that being the case, one of the things that we're looking at as we go through this competitive process is determining what will be the final cost of the project as we go through that. Of course, with the State Corporation Commission, we'll have to show that we did do our due diligence in that area when filing with the State Corporation Commission with this project, to show that we did go through a competitive process. And that we did evaluate the costs and the bids that we did receive for each of the various components. One of the things that we're doing, which was on the timeline for the slides, is in 2021, we're covering going through the RFP process for most of our major components. So that process is actually ongoing as we speak, and that's for transportation and installation scope, which is the vendor that will be installing the components and commissioning them. That's also for an example, components like your offshore substation, your foundations, as well as your inter-array and export cable. So once we have that information back in, we'll be able to better develop the final project cost. But as part of the Virginia Clean Economy Act, one of the things that we will have to demonstrate is that we did go through a competitive procurement and solicitation process for the services. So hopefully that addresses the question.
Thanks, Lloyd. I'm just going to go through some other questions quickly here. So these two are actually related, believe it or not. Do you need a Jones Act vessel since the site's in international waters? Actually, the site is not in international waters. It's actually in the U.S. Exclusive Economic Zone goes out to 200 nautical miles offshore, but it is outside the territorial sea, which is a 12 nautical mile limit. But what that means, because it gets now to the next question, which is, can you use drones for inspection? Current Federal Communications Commission and Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, for piloted drones, they have to be within line of sight, but only extends out to 12 nautical miles because of that territorial sea limit. So there is really an option to do totally autonomous, unpiloted, beyond line of sight drones for blade inspection, for structural inspections, and other activities. And we've actually got a proposal in now for evaluating that, maybe creating a test bed for that at the pilot site. Let's see, there's another question about, can the turbines rotate to catch the wind most efficiently? Probably that's talking about yaw. Yeah, they can yaw. They have a control system to yaw and catch the wind for maximum efficiency.
Yeah, and to that point, the turbines that are currently actually installed out are able to continue. The nacelle continues to point in the direction of the wind to be able to capture the most wind and produce the most energy. And the commercial turbines will be able to do the same.
Let's see, I'm seeing a generated power is 3-phase that comes ashore. It actually lands ashore at dam neck in the distribution grid. So it's the voltage that comes ashore is at 35 kV. I don't know what the voltage is up tower, but there are transformers up tower that convert the generator voltage and transform it to the 34 or 35 kV before it feeds the cable. Let's see here. Looking at, hey, Lloyd, can you post or talk about, there is a Dominion virtual, there's a vendors interested in competing, and I'm sure there are a lot of entrepreneurs in this audience who might be interested in that. If I remember, you've got like a virtual room, supply chain room.
Yeah, so what I can do is I can actually send the link to the Coastal Virginia project site. And that way you'll be able to enter into the virtual room that George is mentioning. And also there's information about how to register as a vendor on that page. I'll post that in the comment section in the chat.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. Let's see. This is another one I'm going to. So there was an estimate that Dominion's renewable energy projects will add $70 monthly to Dominion customers' bill. That seems really high to me. I'm not sure that's the case, and I certainly can't speak for Dominion on that. So Lloyd, once you've got that that virtual room link on the chat, maybe you can address the what impact having. It says renewable energy in the question, so I guess it's both offshore wind and solar, but you might want to just talk a little bit about your resource planning and least cost planning and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so that kind of goes back to the previous question in regards to determining the final cost of the project. So since we're in the process of doing that as we go through the RFP process, I wouldn't be able to speak directly on the amount of cost that would be added to a Dominion customer's bill, just because we are in the process of determining final costs of the project based on the competitive process. So that'll be something that will come out later along in the project lines. So just going back to the Virginia Clean Economy Act and the requirements there of ensuring that we go through a competitive process in order to ensure that we are being prudent when we go through our RFP process to ensure that we're getting the best value overall from a customer standpoint. That's something that's very important and something that's a big part of this project, as well as the procurement process for offshore wind in general.
You know, I'm just going to add something too, that one of the values that the state universities added and we did for the 2010 report is we actually used Dominion financing because it is a publicly regulated utility, and that's actually a huge asset for us that it is publicly regulated, and we actually used all their financing parameters, cost of equity, cost of debt, tax, the way their taxes are structured. And we compared the cost of offshore wind. At the time, there were 3 megawatt turbines, which were teeny tiny little turbines then. But anyway, we compared the cost of a hypothetical offshore wind project with Dominion's combined cycle technology and also the Wise County biomass coal co-fired plant. And offshore wind came in, very close to being competitive at that time based on fossil fuel price projections. So, that's something that the universities can continue to do, is to do an independent, just based on literature, without interfering at all with Dominion's procurement process or competitive solicitations or the SEC. But the universities are well positioned to do an independent cost of energy assessment, and the national labs do that as well. So I think we all want renewables to actually lower the cost. And I liken it to a mortgage. You can get a variable rate mortgage when the price of fossil fuels is low. You can go with a simple cycle or combined cycle gas fired plant, and that'll be the least cost, but you'll pay for it later when natural gas prices, accelerate. Whereas offshore wind and renewables are like a fixed rate mortgage. You know the price ahead of time. And so you've got price stability for like 2 or 3 decades. I think that answers all the questions. We talked about drones for inspection. Anything else, Dan?
No, I think that's it, folks, unless the last call for any chat questions. And if you have one, well, there's one. I'll just read it from my buddy Rick again, Sebringhouse. Are there studies about how to avoid vessels impacting the towers? Depth of water for the field means many commercial vessels will be able to navigate in those waters.
Yeah, so absolutely.
Yes, so oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Lloyd, either way, we definitely. I mean, the Coast Guard has done a port access routing. You'll see the shape of the commercial lease was designed to avoid the deep water channel for vessels approaching the CB buoy. So yeah, there's and Lloyd asked, is there an AIS transponder on the pilot turbines, and will there be AIS automatic identification system transponders on each turbine?
So for the pilot project, the plan is to actually put the AIS transponders on the turbines, but right now they are mapped on the nautical charts as well as the export cable. One of the things that we have to do for the commercial project, just as part of the permitting process, is do a navigational risk assessment. And that navigational risk assessment looks at the different vessel traffic that's within the CVOW commercial area, whether it's fisheries, commercial, or military traffic. And then we also work with the Coast Guard on performing studies on the lighting of the turbine. So that'll also get filtered as part of the permit process to ensure that the CVOW commercial project is safe from a navigational standpoint.
I think that was the last question. And so it's 1:06. We're a little bit over. We had a little bit of a delay from the technical perspective there, but recovered well from that. All in all, I think it was a fantastic program, very informative. My thanks to both Lloyd and George and Rima for their support of this. And I think we landed on their feet. This is an exciting project for the United States, and it's an exciting project for Hampton Roads, and again, I think things are moving along just super. So I want to also thank our participants. Before I do that, George and Lloyd, any final comments?
Yeah. So one of the questions that I think the PDFs of these of the presentations, I believe, can be made available. Is that true, Lloyd? Can a PDF be made available for people who want to, take their time and go through those? And I have it, so I can save it as a PDF and just send it on to Dan along with mine.
George, let me follow up with our internal team, and I'll shoot you an email and let you know in PDF and send it over. Okay,
that's cool. Yeah, that's fine. And then I believe there'll be a recording as well, and hopefully some of the gaps can be edited out, and it'll be a nice. I know there was a recording made. Other than that, I just think stay tuned. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity, as Lloyd said, for the pilot project. If people have innovative ideas, particularly with autonomous systems, if we can land rovers on Mars, as we will the middle of this month. And those rovers can last, some of them have lasted for, way beyond their design lifetime. Certainly, there's a lot of potential to take what we've learned in planetary missions technology and moon mission technology and apply it to offshore wind, so we can minimize the risk to personnel. The more we can bring automation to the offshore wind projects, the less risky they are. And some people may say, well, yeah, but wait, those are jobs, those operating, those O&M technicians. And indeed, they are jobs, but the real job creator is actually in the manufacturing, in the supply chain for building foundations and turbines. There's probably a factor of 100 more jobs per single operation and maintenance job. So you've really got literally thousands to maybe up as much as 10,000 to 20,000 jobs that could be sustained in the manufacturing and shipbuilding industries, as compared to maybe with only several dozen jobs for O&M technicians.
That's very exciting. Very exciting. If there are no further comments from George or Lloyd, I want to thank all participants for taking part in this Zoom session. We went a little bit long, but I think it's all right. As George mentioned, I have recorded this. I'll edit out the spots that need to be edited out, and I will send an email out, hopefully with those PDFs that I can attach that are approved for sending out, along with the link to the video, which will be up on YouTube. And from a Hampton Roads Innovation Collaborative perspective, the next event, which I mentioned early on in this session, is going to be Tuesday, March 9th, which is the State of Cyber with Tracy Gregario of G2 Ops Inc. and Bartosz Wojciech of Decision Point Global, who happened to be our keynote speaker when he launched this series all the way back in November of 2020. So with that, thank you, everybody. I'm going to end the session. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and probably watch for my email out with that content within the next few days. Thank you again, and goodbye.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Lloyd.
See you all. Have a wonderful day.